Hello dear students, and welcome to this series of revision videos which aim at helping you get ready for the bac exam. My name is Sausan and I'll be accompanying you throughout the series. Today we are going to focus on how to write a biography effectively and correctly. As you are accustomed to, the hints in a biography are generally presented in a table or as brief hints. But before we start writing or developing the hints provided, please do read the instruction carefully because it includes not only the name of the person you are writing about, but it may also include some information that can be so useful while writing the introduction. Here's an example. In this first example, the instruction states, use the notes below to write a short biography of the famous Black leader, Dr. Martin Luther King. As you can see here, Dr. Martin Luther King is neither a writer nor a scientist. He is a leader, and he is also a colored man. So the piece of information provided in the instruction can be useful to build an appropriate profile of the person you will be writing about. Therefore, we can infer or conclude that Dr. Martin Luther King was an activist acting against racism. And this idea will be reinforced after reading all the hints that follow. Before we start writing, we must always start to think about the possible expressions that we can use in our introduction and jot them down on the draft paper. For instance, X was one of the most famous or well-known or distinguished or influential, we say, figures or persons in the world or in the USA or in any other part of the world. In this task, we can write, Dr. Martin Luther King was one of the most famous and influential activists in the world. After that, you move to the date and place of birth, which come in general at the beginning of the hints. For some pupils, writing the sentence seems easy, but for some others, it seems challenging, and this is because they have some problems with, first, the tense of the verb, second, the form of the verb, and finally, the prepositions. Let's start by explaining the use of tenses. In general, in biographies, we always use the simple past tense, because we must always refer to past dates that are already given in the hints. However, this must not be the case if you are provided with dates that indicate the present or the future. In this case, you must use the simple present tense with present dates and the future tense with the future dates. A last remark about tenses, which can be considered as a tip, is if you are still struggling with the past and past participle forms of the irregular verbs, I suggest that you watch the video, which link is displayed here. I am sure that you will learn them while having much fun. The second challenge is the form of the verb. Here you should be careful of whether your verb should be in the active form or in the passive, which structure is to be plus the past participle of the main verb. For example, he or she, in brackets, birth. Can you guess the answer? Well, if your answer is was born, then it's correct. The last challenge is the correct use of prepositions with dates and places. Let's talk a bit about this. First, when we deal with the dates, we use one of the two prepositions that are in or on. We use in when we only have the year. For example, we say in 1929. Or when we have the month and the year. For instance, in May 1929. Or when we only have the month, like for example, in May or in August, etc. The second preposition that we mentioned is on. We use it either if we have a day, like for example on Monday or on Friday, or it can be used if we have a full date, which means a date that includes the day, the month, and the year. For instance, we say on April the 1st, 1945, which is the same as the 1st of April, 1945. In other words, we must write on here because of the presence of the day in the date, which is the first. So the first here indicates the day. And it's not always necessary to say Monday or Tuesday, for instance, to mention the day. Now that we've finished explaining the adequate use of prepositions with the date, let's focus on the place. In general, in biographies, we are interested in the place or places of birth and death of the person we are writing about. This place is generally a country. So we say, for example, in the United States. Or it can be a town or a state and a country. Like, for instance, in Florida, USA. In Florida, in the USA. The preposition in must be written only once before the state, and the one that is written right before the country, in this example, of course, must be deleted and replaced by a comma, like in the example that we've just seen. Okay, let's go back to our sample task and try to develop the first sentence. Now, for this task, we could, for instance, say, Dr. Martin Luther King, who is one of the most famous and influential Black leaders in the world, was born in 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia. By the way, we generally use many dates in a biography, and this can cause a problem because of the redundancy of some expressions like in or on plus date. Fortunately, there are other ways to convey the meaning without having to repeat the same structure many times. For instance, we can write, in 1993, 10 years later, after 10 years, when he or she was 20 years old, at the age of 20, afterwards, besides, moreover, in addition, etc. Along with the dates, the hints contain specific information about childhood, education, career, and achievements or awards. First, when we would like to speak about childhood, we use expressions like during his or her childhood or when he or she was young. Second, if we want to speak about someone's education, we use the following expressions. First, he or she studied at, and you mention the university's name, or you say, he or she graduated from, of course, university, and here again, you cite the name of the university. You can also say, he or she got his or her diploma from, and once more, you mention the university name. Finally, you can write, he or she obtained his or her doctor's degree when he or she was only years old. You'd better write only if you want to emphasize the age of the person who was remarkably young when he graduated or when he accomplished a great achievement. As for the career, I suggest the following expressions. The first is, he or she worked as a physician or a doctor, for example. If the person you are writing about has more than one occupation, you say, he or she held many jobs, such as, and you list them. A last example that I suggest is, he or she devoted all his or her life to teaching and inventing. Please make sure you use the expression correctly. In fact, its structure is devote or dedicate one's life plus to plus verb ing. Now, the last explanation will be about the achievements or the awards. In fact, we can cite them by saying, he or she won, for example, the Grammy Music Awards in or on plus the date, as we have explained earlier in this video. We can replace the verb win by the passive verb was awarded, so we get this example. He or she was awarded, for example, the Nobel Prize for Literature or for Peace in or on plus a date. Finally, we come to the last hint, which is the death. Since speaking about the death comes generally at the end, you can use the linker finally. But if you want to emphasize the fact that the person's death is a real loss to humanity, you may write the linker unfortunately. As for the verb, you can either write he or she died or passed away. But if you are given assassination instead, you will have to say he or she was assassinated. And this was the case for Dr. Martin Luther King. Now, before I leave you, I want to give you my top tips that will help you work effectively and get brilliant marks. 1. Stick to the chronological order of events while writing a biography. That is to say, order the events according to their time of occurrence. 2. Watch out your tenses and make sure that they fit the given dates. Moreover, pay attention to the correct use of irregular verbs, as well as that of the active and passive voices. 3. Watch out your punctuation and capitalization. 4. Proofread or review your paragraph before moving to another task. Finally, keep an eye on your watch and manage your time effectively. Don't spend too much time writing a paragraph at the expense of other questions. You should only spend the appropriate amount of time on every task to be able to finish your exam on time and without being stressed. Our video has come to an end. I hope this presentation has been clear enough to make you learn how to write a biography. Thank you for your attention and good luck.